Okay, so good morning to you. I'm sure, as you're all aware, the budget happened yesterday, and to get a bit of an insight as to what that may mean to businesses, who better to go to than AURIA Accountancy? So let me first of all just introduce you to you. On my left, we have Spencer Hall, who is the Director of London.
Yes.
And covering our home counties over in Hertfordshire, we have Andy Fairclough. Morning. Good morning to you all. So, gents, let's dive into it, shall we? Let's dive into it. So where do we start? Listen, I mean, I've got some actual questions that have been sent here from some people that have come through via social media platforms and things. But do you want to give us maybe just a very quick recap, a very quick overview in terms of what you think it might mean to London? First of all, starting off.
Well, Mrs. Reeve started with a cry of invest, 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 and let's rebuild Britain. From our point of view, I didn't realise that business owners and entrepreneurs were going to stomach most of the 40 billion tax rise bill. It's very slanted towards hitting those businesses quite hard, and we've just got to take a step back now and pick out the bones of what that actually means to the day-to-day running of any business.
Yeah. And obviously away from the kind of city, I'm guessing you've probably had a fair few phone calls this morning as well from various clients. What's the general kind of consensus been on it?
Well, I think the general feel is that clients are concerned. They don't know what is going to happen. Like none of us do until it actually kicks into play. But I think they've done a very good job of being able to confuse people, make people think that is one thing that it might be disguised with others. So I think that's where people need to be proactive in the discussions that they're going to have into understanding how it's going to affect their business, their daily lives, their take-home pay, and their families, so they can plan and prepare for what's coming.
Okay, it's interesting you say that actually, because in terms of what's coming out here, is I think that the budget as a whole is people came out with thinking it wasn't as bad as they thought it was.
And that was the strategy of them, making it sound like it was going to be
Yeah.
dreadful, and it's one of those. So,
Yeah.
But the problem is, I think the devil's in the detail. So it's all under the bonnet. So whilst it doesn't appear to be, and I've had a couple of people phone me this morning, doesn't appear to be too bad from a macro level. I think, as Andy quite rightly says, that we'll wait until April hits and those increase, certainly in those owner-managed businesses, tax regimes, it will make a difference. It will certainly make a difference.
Okay. Well, I think you're right. The devil's in the detail. So let's dive into some of the questions that we've had, and feel free, either of you, to jump in and let us know what your initial thoughts are, really. So one of the first ones we've had through is looking at tax implications. So I'll just read it out to you. They've said, how will the new budget impact corporate tax rates for SMEs? Are there any specific changes that they need to be prepared for? And the secondary follow-up to that is there any new tax reliefs or deductions for small businesses, particularly those that may still be recovering from the impacts of the pandemic? You'd like to grab that one?
Well, I think they started off by saying that there was going to be no increase in corporation tax rates, and they've so far stuck with that.
But I suppose we've got to bear in mind that the little friend Rishi, who obviously left yesterday, they already put it up from 19% to 25%. So again, from a small business owner, in the last year or so, small businesses have been feeling that effect anyway.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And again, this is where the perception of how they delivered it comes into play, because they're quite rightly trying to jump on that we've not changed corporation tax rates, like they said, not going to do. But and I've had conversations with people this morning. I've gone, oh, it's great, corporation taxes are going up. But it has already gone up, so you're already suffering. They're just saying that they're not going to kill you anymore. But they also haven't outlined whether they're going to make any changes to the stages of how corporation tax is implemented based on the profitability of your business. So obviously it starts at 19%, goes up to 25%. They haven't said whether any of that's going to change. They've left themselves leeway to change that, should they consider the need to. So again, until it actually comes into play, we don't know how that's going to affect businesses. But what businesses should be looking at doing is understanding the corporation tax rates and where they sit with their profitability now, and going, how's that going to impact us cash flow wise for planning for when we have to pay our tax bills.
And in terms of that planning, as we know, and we'll come into later, we could be coming back to the next budget, and we could be getting asked for more if it didn't go well in that next kind of 2 years, depending on what it is.
They've said they won't do that. They've said they won't do that. They've said that these tax rates are the tax rates for the next 4 years. Right. They're not going to change.
Okay.
And they're not going to come back to the well. But as we've seen with every other government, that doesn't necessarily play out.
Okay. So still wise to carry on planning for potential future growth as opposed to 4 years of this is where we're at. Okay, all right. We've had a question in here which is with kind of green initiatives. So any kind of support on innovation or green initiatives, obviously it's a buzzword and something that people are passionate about. So will there be any increased grants or subsidies for businesses looking to invest in sustainable practices or green technology?
Well, I don't think we had anything in the budget that specifically related to green issues, other than obviously the increase in the oil and gas industry, with the levies being pushed up to 38 or by 38%, I believe.
Right.
So therefore, they're grabbing with one hand where they're going to spend that money with the other. We don't know. There was nothing really coming from the budget yesterday, which surprised me, because obviously nothing really touched climate change. Nothing really touched the sort of green element, as you say. So yeah, we'll just have to obviously wait and see. I think again, you know, from a green point of view, they put the I think it was the air passenger duty for economy class up by £2. They then, in the way that they would, from a sort of petty-mindedness point of view, but we'll go on to that later, had a 50% increase in private jet duty, passenger duty. But for me, again, £2 on an economy, that doesn't really signal a huge change in the sort of green policy. And if that's the way you're going to go, it just seemed to be a little bit petty with a private jet passenger. But you've got economy and you've got business and you've got first class over in a much wider sphere. So, you know, I think they didn't really push through with anything on that.
No. Okay. I suppose that's the same. Again, we've had other sectors coming in: R&D, technology, manufacturing, in any sector, property. I don't know, any sector there really that's looking for any kind of support at this stage.
Well, they said they're going to keep R&D in play, but we've already seen that they're being more strict and stringent on it. Rightly so at the moment. So whether that's going to make any massive changes for anyone that's going through R&D claims is yet to be seen. But there wasn't really anything that came out of it as, we're going to help any particular industries out. It was more, where are we going to be gaining some of this 40 billion that we need to bring in? So it's more a case of people understanding what parts of those tax increases are actually going to affect them.
Yeah. Okay, all right. Well, the next hot topic I had that came through, this one came through on LinkedIn this morning. This was around cost of living and wage policy. So try not to laugh, everyone, as we ask the question. So, what changes in the national living wage, and what support is available for small businesses that may be struggling to meet the higher payroll costs?
Well, I think successive governments have shown that us as owner-managed businesses have had very little or no support over the years, and it started pre-COVID. It started with the fact that they recognised that owner-managed businesses that pay personal allowance and dividends, the dividend rates were cut, and obviously the tax on dividends had increased, and so they wanted to effectively push owner-managed business, or the owners of businesses, closer to a more of a sort of payroll, and align it with income tax rates. So for me, it kind of kicked off from there. Then obviously during COVID, owner-managed businesses again weren't really supported. If you owned a business, you weren't really supported. You didn't receive any sort of, you couldn't furlough because obviously you had to run your business. So you got no support there. You may have been thrown a bounce back loan, and now obviously they're strictly reviewing what you did in detail, what you spent that bounce back loan on. I've got a couple of clients now that have had inspections as to where that money went. And obviously there was no guidance at the time. It was just, here's 50,000, get on with it. And again, and then we've come into this now, and we're coming out of the COVID time, and we're now being hit with employers NI and an increase in employers NI. But it links to their manifesto in that we're not going to put up corporation tax, and as we just discussed, well, that had already gone up 6% a year or so ago. We're not going to put up VAT. Okay, they stayed well clear of VAT, and we're not going to increase income tax. Well, there's a lot of things that you can do that will hit people in their pockets and reduce household income. And I think they've managed to do a number of those within this budget, which we can discuss, which I'm sure we'll discuss now.
I think also where they were talking about the national minimum wage increases and how that impacts, I think it's obviously we're all right to want everybody to be correctly paid at the right rate, at a nice, healthy living wage, but how that directly impacts on small businesses and who they're going to employ and how they're going to employ them. I've already had a conversation with a client this morning who has gone, well, if they're going to increase that, the national living wage is going to come into play at a level for 18-year-olds straight away as they scale that in. They're going to start not employing people. They're going to have force people into self-employment, force people into sole trader businesses, because they're not going to want to commit to having certain people, lower wage people, on longer term contracts, on fixed term contracts. So how the fallout of correctly bringing in better wages, how that's all actually going to play out with respect to how the business are actually going to be able to afford it, if they can afford it, that's where the impact's going to be felt.
Just, is there any flip side? It's just a full on, just thinking of right now, in terms of businesses that offer their services, I suppose, HR is often one, marketing is often one, things that can kind of get cut quite quickly. But actually, is there something to be said about if that person's not being employed in-house and therefore as a full-time basis, that there might be some more opportunity and work for other companies that can offer a service where there is no NI, it is a fixed cost that's going in, those types of savings. Would there be some kind of counterbalance?
It depends on what level of service is needing to be had, because a lot of companies, smaller companies, don't need a full-time in-house HR person. They don't need full-time in-house marketing people, so they might not necessarily have them anyway. So the change probably wouldn't affect them. They wouldn't have to be taking people out and boosting an external business necessarily.
But then you can argue if you do have an in-house, well, you might potentially get rid of that person and then go for
and then you replace
a third party, outsourced. But then that person's lost their job.
Of course. Of course. One person's suffering and others benefiting.
Exactly. It's all good having by increasing this and increasing that, where it's effectively allowing businesses to hire another 4 people on national minimum wage. But depending on how particular businesses might want or need to scale, they might not need to be hiring people on national minimum wage. They might need to be hiring people on a higher wage.
Which then levels of experience and everything else that's required to be.
That part of it's irrelevant. And with the freezing or the continual freezing of the personal allowances, even having the national minimum wage where it should be over the time, people are still going to have less money in their pay packets.
Okay, before we go on to these other questions, I think because we kind of gone into the realms of national insurance and therefore any kind of allowance that may help with the smaller side of things. Can we just touch on what the actual change in national insurance is? The percentage they've said, but the threshold, and therefore what the percentage is likely to really be, any kind of allowance there might be, and then potentially if you have an example of how this might affect a company would be quite good.
Yeah, I mean, I think again, I spoke to a client yesterday after the budget, and the impression was, oh, well, it's not too bad. It's 1.2%, so it's not going to make much of a difference. But obviously, the nuance was that the limit as to when you start paying employers NI dramatically dropped by almost 50%. So therefore, you know, it will make a demonstrable difference to cash flow come April.
So what's the real percentage based on that, do you think? Is it more kind of over 3%?
Yeah, so I mean, we've got to crunch the numbers, and obviously we'll get something out over the next couple of days on that. But because there's also the employers' allowance, they've changed the reliefs on that. They did put that up. So again, it's about working through those numbers to see exactly where the impact is felt and at what value. But you're probably talking around 3%, 3.5% on a payroll. And it's not just the tax charge, and this is what a lot of people don't really understand, it's actual cash flow, because obviously you have to pay your PAYE and NI by the 19th of the following month. So it's kind of like, yeah, you've got to actually you've got to find that extra cash without moving forward. You've still got the same number of people working in your business.
Yeah, same revenue coming
in, and you've now got to go and find that cash within the 3 weeks of the following month. So again, that just puts unnecessary pressure on owner managed businesses and small businesses. And you know, the Chancellor is pushing forward growth, invest. No, what she's saying is invest over here. We're going to grow by just taxing small businesses, and then we're going to invest in effectively state-run, the NHS, trains, that kind of the infrastructure of the country. But it'll be the small businesses that have to pay for it. But ultimately, it'll be the individuals that are working within those small businesses. So whilst they're saying there's an income tax freeze, there is an income tax freeze, but this is going to hit working people. This will hit working people.
Yeah. I mean, with the employer, like Spencer was discussing, the employers NI, yes, it's gone up from 13.8 to 15%, and this is to be clear, this is the national insurance that business owners, employers pay. It's not suffered by the employees, it's suffered by the business owners. So it's just going up. That's obviously changed. If you earn over £9,100, that's when employers started paying employers' national insurance. Now that's dropped to £5,000. Caveat is they've increased. Employers don't pay national insurance. Used to be £5,000. It's going up to £10,500 of national insurance before you start to pay it. Now, people might think that that's giving the small businesses, well, it's not going to make any difference because they've got a higher level of national insurance of allowance that they can receive until they start paying. And for the really small business owners, then they probably won't see much of a difference to start with. But when you start having probably 3+ employees all earning 25 grand plus, you will eat into your employer's national insurance allowance very, very quickly. That once that's wiped out, your rates go up and you'll be paying more employers' national insurance, and that will impact on your profitability. It will impact on your cash flow, as Spencer said, because it's more money to have to find that doesn't come from anywhere else every month.
I guess that's the big problem, right? Is that if you were doing quite well and you were looking next year at doing some kind of recruitment or recruitment drive, whether that be one person or not, you now have to stop, don't you, and take account and think, well, do I want to do that? Because as soon as you do that, you can start hitting these new thresholds, and then
and there's a lot of labour intensive sectors are going to be hit, like hospitality sector, for argument's sake, or like I had a conversation with somebody from a hair salon, and they employ a lot of people. The likelihood is they're all employed they're not employed at massive salaries because they work part time, but the likelihood is that they will now be paying national insurance earlier because of the threshold changed down to 5,000. That they might go back to the old model of everyone self-employed and rents a chair.
Yes.
Talking about the hospitality industry, they have a lot of people that they will employ. So individually, those people might only trip into a little bit of national insurance over the 5,000, but they will hit that earlier than 9,000. But if you have loads of them, because you're running a hospitality business or events business, you will clear your national insurance allowance very, very quickly, and you will then have more of an impact. Again, it all flips back to planning as early as possible, understanding how that's going to affect your cash flow, and seeing how that's going to impact you from next year.
So you can try and forecast correctly
As best as possible.
Yeah. Quite an interesting one that came through on Instagram actually this morning was, what's the impact on financial services and global competitiveness with regards to the global financial hub post-Brexit?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think this is linked with the domicility status, and we've heard for quite a number of months now that obviously they were going to scrap the non-domicile reliefs, and they obviously ratified that yesterday, so that was no great surprise. Obviously they're going to completely remove domicility as an issue from 2025, and then they're going to means test and introduce a residency status, if you like. Again, we don't have the details as to what that will be. But for me, again, there doesn't seem to be a lot of forward thinking on this. Obviously, people, the wealthier global individuals and industries invest in countries, and you want people like that in this country. Do you want to tax them from income that they've generated from their other businesses abroad? I don't think that's a fair tax. Also, what we do lose sight of is what do these individuals bring to the country? Well, they bring wealth to the country. They create wealth in this country. They then, they buy cars, they go to restaurants, they send their kids to private schools. So, they've got all of the other ancillary investments around them actually being here, which I think is going to affect local economies, which again affects small businesses in and around those areas that these people live. I don't think it's going to help us from a global competitive point of view.
Interesting. Okay, next question was a Facebook question, and that was around local business rates and levies. We have here, have there been any adjustments to business rates, especially for high street retailers? Are there any new reliefs or exemptions?
Well, I think the start point is that for the hospitality and industries around that, they're retaining the 40% business rate relief, which is obviously great for that those types of industries and those types of businesses, that they can be supported. I think there's a wider issue in respect to what about every other industry sector. Everybody's feeling the pinch. Everybody is feeling the effects of higher energy costs, etc., etc. What makes an industry deserve or need some more business rate help? And surely there could be scope to increase that to other industries, not necessarily just limited to the hospitality side of stuff.
Yeah. Okay, all right. Next up, we have capital gains tax. So financial regulations, taxes on high income earners, etc. Anything there to digest? Quite a bit.
Well, we've seen the capital gains personal allowance reduce over the last 4 or 5 years. It's now down to £3,000 a year of capital gains you can make before you pay any tax. Now that's obviously being affected again with capital gains tax plans and tax rates changing. So the basic rate of capital gains tax is going from 10% to 18%. The next rate is going from 20% to 24%. So people who've got investments, who've got assets that will realise them and sell them at some point, are going to be hit with higher taxes to pay. It makes investors challenge and question when they want to sell their assets, whether they want to buy more assets, and how that's going to impact what markets those assets are being sold in. It'll reduce the liquidity of those markets.
And I think, not to go into, again, from a political standpoint, this was done many years ago. So the actual annual exemptions, as Andy quite rightly said, have come down. They were 12,300 2 years ago. Down to 6, down to 3. So again, don't forget, you invest your money from net income. So you've already suffered your income tax on it. You've then got a pot of money that you want to obviously secure your future or your children's future, and you invest in, say, stocks and shares as an example, or even property. We can come on to that in a minute. And then you again get hit with an increase in tax in that area. So it just seems to me that, again, there's this hit of Middle England, but it's not just started from yesterday. This has been coming, and it's been the last 4, 5, 6 years that we've been suffering.
Yeah, and Spencer's saying it has been coming for a while. We know business asset disposal relief. The limits on that went from been cut to £1 million
from 10 million.
From 10 million.
Yeah.
So that's a massive change and massive impact for people who've got businesses that they want to sell and realise the money on. And it's worth saying that business asset disposal relief, the old entrepreneurs relief, you've got time to plan if you do want to sell or get out of your business now. Between now and the end of the tax year, 5th of April, business asset disposal relief is staying at 10%. From April next year, it will be 14%, and from April 26th, it's going up to 18%. So, if business owners are looking at planning for their succession and when they want to remove themselves from their business and sell their shares, then it is something that needs to look at planning now.
There is some planning that you can actually do that we can actually reduce that to 0%, and we can come on to that on a later date. But again, this is just a great example of how owner-managed businesses are being hit. It's an area that you pay income tax. So even if you're paying tax via dividends, you're employing people. Your employer's NI's gone up. You then spend, 20 years building your business up. You now want to come to sell your business. You did have a 10 million lifetime allowance, which captured quite a lot of small, medium-sized businesses. The likelihood of selling it and making a gain of over 10 million is pretty low. They've now massively reduced that to 1 million. And when I say they, it was the previous government that's brought that down. So again, we move away from that political arena, and it just seems to me that the successive governments are trying to align business owners with PAYE and people with pay slips. And it was referenced yesterday about people with pay slips. And it made me laugh when Rishi did actually mention that. Because it was actually their government that didn't support people that weren't on pay slips during COVID, and he was the Chancellor at that point. So, again, this the business property relief one is a real tough one to take, because you spend a lot of time, a lot of effort building a business. You take on the stress and the strains and the juggling and cash flow and things that we've discussed now. And when you come to dispose your business, they've now reduced the rate and the allowances, and they've put up the actual CGT rate on it. So it seems to me that we're getting to that point where running a business is a completely thankless task, and the little wins that you used to have been massively eroded. I was going to say slightly eroded, but they're not. They've been massively eroded over the last few years.
I think probably the final bit to say on capital gains tax is where they've left the capital gains on residential properties alone. What they have then factored in and brought in is the increase to stamp duty for second properties. So are investors going to continue to look at buying further properties if they've got an increased stamp duty, which will then lead to people probably selling their investment properties earlier or clearly to how is that going to affect the property market.
Well, the stamp duty is going up from 2 to 5%, isn't it? So,
that's a huge
and
increase.
again, as you quite rightly say, that's going to impact investment into those areas for people from their already taxed income to invest in those areas. What that's going to do is actually fuel a fire that's been raging for the last few years, and that's rental properties and the rates of rental costs. So again, that hits the working person. And that's them in the bracket. So those that can't actually afford to get a mortgage have to rent. They're your working man and woman. And whilst the government are very adept at manoeuvring the narrative to say, well, we're not hitting the working man.
Yeah.
Well, that hits them right between the eyes, because obviously they've got to find that rental is a basic supply and demand. As Andy rightly says, with that with the SDLT change, there's going to be less people investing in property, which means that your supply is going to be smaller, which means that the rental charges are going to go up. Yeah. So this cost of living crisis will only get worse over the next few years. I strongly believe that.
And there was nothing in the budget, was there, in terms of first-time buyers or any of these help to buy schemes or anything like that?
Yeah, they wanted growth. They want grow. We want to grow. Well, how are you going to grow?
And we've been growing for the last 6 months, haven't we?
Yeah, but if you're pushing people who are smaller scale landlords into what are they going to do? Are they going to keep investing or not, and potentially sell? Then you're encouraging people to have a look at what they need to do from their inheritance tax planning and how that's all going to come into play from planning their wealth and their distribution of that further down the line.
Right, sticking on with taxes. A few emails this morning I know that you guys had, which were mainly around kind of inheritance tax, and I think you also had some with regards to people's pensions as well.
Yeah, I think that what they are bringing in with respect to bringing people's pension pots into inheritance tax charges is going to have a massive impact on what people choose to plan for their retirement, how they choose to plan for their retirement, whether they invest in pensions or whether they invest in something else, use their money for something else, whether that's here or overseas.
Or large segment properties.
Yeah, not wanting to pay the additional stamp duty on properties. But we had a worked example from a tax advisor who said that if somebody's got a £2 million pension pot, should they die after April 2027, they will leave their the people that they're leaving their money to with an additional £800,000 of inheritance tax to deal with. So either die before April 27 or think about what you're going to do with your pension pots.
But it's an enormous increase. Yeah. And again, it just seemed to slip under the radar yesterday, because not many people, obviously, again, the working man will kind of understand that, and they've been building up pension pots. Again, you invest in your pension, and based on the fact that you don't have to pay inheritance tax. So obviously they're going to take 40% of that slice now. So when you're sat back thinking about what you do with that, with your income left, your net income, if you like, well, you're going to query whether you want to invest it into a pension. And then, so where does that then leave the overall economy? Where does that leave a generation of people that, how they're going to effectively live into their old age? That's what pensions are all about. It's about, well, it's money after you've done your 30, 40 years of your working life. You should be able to take a little bit of a backseat without worrying about, well, I'm going to lose 40% of whatever's left and what I give my children from what I've worked for. So again, it's funny that was just kind of been slipped under the radar a little bit.
Well, I suppose it was an hour and a half long, so
yeah.
There was going to be bits that were going to do that. So, gents, is there any other areas that you want to cover that we've not kind of covered there in terms of the questions that we've had that come through?
Well, I think it's worth noting that they've come out and said that they're going to look to support and increase funding to HMRC. So, from a business owner's perspective, you need to make sure that you are up to date with your taxes, up to date with knowing what your deadlines are and what's got to happen and when, because if they're going to increase interest on and penalties on late payments of tax, to try and encourage people to pay earlier or to pay on time, even though some people are still feeling the negative effects of trying to work their way out of COVID. It's the more that they're going to invest in AI and tech at HMRC, which is severely needed, don't get me wrong, but it's only going to put more of a target on small business owners who might not necessarily have their cash flow in.
Well, when you couple that with the employers and I rise as well, that really is a cash flow hit, isn't it? So again, from a HMRC point of view, I still have clients in the sort of entertainment industries, film, TV, and things like that are still recovering from COVID because you had the actors and the writers' strike. So that was only last year. They're all on. A number of them are on payment plans with HMRC, who are charging them interest for those payment plans, and obviously again they slip it under the radar. We'll find next year from April, excuse me, that those interest rates will go up. Yeah, it's something that has been borne out of the last couple of years, but they're just going to be paying a hell of a lot more interest on that tax that's owed. But Andy's quite right. For me, we've always had this, from an industry point of view, we've always had this kind of view of running businesses, filing accounts, things like that, 9 months after the year end. It's always been very reactive to things, and clients have always been fairly reactive to things. But with the changes that we've seen, not just yesterday, but over the last few years, the key is that you have to really monitor your profitability, your cash flow, and what you're doing and when things need to be paid. The only way you can do that is real-time accounting, if you like. So your monthly managements and your quarterly managements, at worst quarterly managements, just so that you can be ahead of the game and that you're not paying unnecessary fines and penalties.
The more robust your financial systems and reporting are, the clearer your outlook on your business is and the clearer your outlook on what your liability is going to be, and the more chance you have of keeping on with that success.
So actually, in terms of just having just a bookkeeper or trying to do something yourself on some kind of system, in the long run, it could actually cost you more money than actually having accountancy advice.
Absolutely, because if you don't do the right, if you have it's like anything. It's how you use that information, but it's the quality of that information. So if you're not planning, projecting, and monitoring correctly, then those fines and those interests are going to far outweigh the money that you would spend in getting the right people on board. And I've always said to clients, look, you've got to stop thinking of it as a cost now. It's an investment, and it's going to save you money in the long run. If we can't sit there and save you money, then we're in the wrong business. And that's how we really like to target and tackle things.
But coupled up with saving the money as well, and from an investment perspective, that's perfect, as Spencer says. But it's about getting businesses to understand what they actually want to achieve, short term, medium term, long term. So do they want to sell for a particular amount in 5-10 years' time? Do they want to pass a legacy of a business over to their family? Do they want to just earn as much money as possible and not have things to worry about and pay for holidays? Understanding all of that allows you to work with the numbers that you've got in-house, the robust reporting, the management plans, the cash flow forecasts, etc., to know that you can actually achieve what you want to achieve. No point going, we've got all of this, but are we actually getting to where we want to get to? And that's what you can get from working with your accountants, working with your tax advisors, to go, is this doing what we want it to do? Are we on the correct path? And by doing that more regularly, you can make the adjustments that you need to continue on that path.
Okay. So, in one word, I can just sum up the budget.
That's a tough one.
Historic.
Historic. Okay.
I'm still struggling. I think we've got to look also at just quickly. We've got to look at the fact that we had a 40 billion increase in taxes yesterday, and for me, it's about, well, where is that 40 billion going? You know, there's a couple of things we haven't touched on, like VAT on school fees. Yet we're spending 2.3 billion on state schools. We've got 27 billion about to be spent on the NHS. Yet I think it was West Streeting strategies not even being published or comes out till next April. But that spending's over the next 2 years. So you'll already be 6 months down the line before your strategy comes out. So again, they're just little things there that we need to have the next few days just to kind of, as I say, tinker under the bonnet, just have a look at how all of these things interconnect and what it actually does mean for everybody out there.
That was the longest one
That was the longest one.
response I've ever had. Right, on that, gents, I think it's probably time to go and have a beer. And the good thing, of course, is it's going to be 1p cheaper a pint.
Well, not for me, because I drink bottle beer, but
I'm fine.
Thanks for watching. If you've got any more questions or anything over the coming days or any concerns, we'll be putting out the contact details for AURIA Accountancy at the end of the videos. So please do get in touch with them, and she'll be very happy to have a discovery call with you. Thanks very much. Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.